The old man said nothing as he shuffled into court, wrists cuffed, shoulders bowed beneath a coat 2 sizes too big. The judge barely looked up when she asked for his name. "Samuel Whitaker," he said quietly, "Staff Sergeant, United States Marine Corps." No one in the room blinked. Just another homeless man on trial for trespassing. But what if the man society forgot once carried 6 wounded soldiers through enemy fire? What if he saved someone in that very courtroom and didn't even know it? This isn't a story about war. It's a story about memory, about what we choose to honor and what we let slip through the cracks. The old man shuffled into the courtroom in silence, wrists cuffed, eyes low. His coat, an oversized military field jacket, faded and frayed, hung off his shoulders like a relic of someone else's past. Under the sterile courtroom lights, every crease in his face seemed deeper. Each line carved by winters slept on sidewalks and wars nobody remembered. "State your name," the clerk said flatly. The man cleared his throat. "Samuel Whitaker, Staff Sergeant, United States Marine Corps." The room remained unmoved. Just another case, just another man who lost the fight with life. Only Judge Margaret Holloway's eyes flickered at the name, but she said nothing yet. Sam took his seat, slouched slightly on the cold wooden bench. The silence in the room pressed in like a fog. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from years of untreated pain, both physical and unseen. "Case 47B, the bailiff announced. City of Newbridge versus Samuel Whitaker. Charges: disturbing the peace, trespassing, resisting arrest." Margaret Holloway reviewed the case file in front of her. At 62, she'd seen every flavor of hardship, but something about this file made her hand pause. Her breath caught. "Whitaker." She glanced again at the man before her, graying, hunched, invisible to most. That name. It was the same as the man her brother had written about from Fallujah nearly 20 years ago. The Marine who'd carried him to safety through enemy fire. The one no one ever found again. The young prosecutor began. "Mr. Whitaker has been warned multiple times about loitering behind Jefferson Street Cafe. The owner filed 3 complaints this month alone." He didn't mention the rest, that Sam never begged, never hassled customers. He just sat by the vent where warm air escaped the kitchen, trying to survive. "On the night of January 4th, the prosecutor continued, officers found him behind the cafe at 11:45 p.m. He refused to vacate." Sam raised his eyes slightly. "I didn't refuse, sir. Just asked for 5 more minutes. Had half a sandwich. One of the cooks, Tommy, he left it there for me." But the prosecutor didn't care. He continued, "This is his 3rd citation this year. We recommend 30 days of community service and a no trespass order for the downtown area." Judge Holloway's brow furrowed. A no trespass order would ban Sam from the 4th Street shelter, the only warm place left. It would cut him off from church meals, from the small pieces of mercy the city still offered. "Mr. Whitaker," she said gently, "do you have legal representation today?" Sam shook his head. "My public defender got pulled into another courtroom, ma'am. Would you like to speak on your own behalf?" He straightened a bit, as if remembering a different posture from a different time. "No excuses, ma'am. Just needed to stay warm." "Why that location?" the judge pressed. Sam hesitated. "Tommy leaves food sometimes. Known him since he was a boy. His father served with me. Desert Storm." The room stilled slightly. Margaret looked down again at the file. Something stirred. A year, a unit. Fallujah, 2004. She flipped to a deeper section. Then she stopped. 2nd Battalion 8th Marines, April 17th. Her brother's last letter had mentioned that exact day. Suddenly, the courtroom doors opened. A man in a navy blue suit stepped in, briefcase in hand. He moved directly to the defense table. "Your Honor," he said, "David Langston. I've just been retained to represent Mr. Whitaker." The courtroom blinked. Even Sam looked confused. "I didn't call a lawyer," he whispered. "You didn't need to," Langston replied, lowering his voice. "My firm is handling this pro bono." Judge Holloway narrowed her eyes. "This is highly irregular, Mr. Langston. The court was not informed of this change. It was a last-minute development, Your Honor. I respectfully request a brief recess to confer with my client." Margaret stared at them both. The resemblance, the dates, the name. And now this lawyer, Langston, her late husband's former law partner. He wouldn't just show up. Something deeper was at play. "This court will recess for 15 minutes, she said, rising. As she left the bench, her composure cracked for only a second. A tremor in her hand, a flicker in her breath, and a quiet name echoing in her mind. Whitaker, the Marine who disappeared, the one her brother called a guardian angel in the desert. He had come back, not in glory, not in uniform, but in chains. And yet, even now, even here, he held himself with something the world could never quite strip away. 15 minutes passed in measured silence. Inside the empty consultation room, Sam sat across from David Langston, his new lawyer, though he still didn't know why or how. "I didn't ask for this," Sam said again. Langston offered a calm smile. "You didn't have to. Sometimes the right people finally notice." Sam looked away. Years of mistrust wouldn't vanish just because someone wore a suit. "You mind if I ask?" Langston said gently. "What happened after Fallujah?" Sam's eyes hardened, not with anger but fatigue. "I got back stateside in '05. Memory wasn't right, head wasn't right. They said it was TBI, PTSD. I didn't argue." He exhaled. "They gave me a discharge packet and a number to call. I called. No one answered." Langston leaned forward. "Your VA benefits? Stuck in paperwork. Wrong mailing address. Then came the appeals. Then silence." Sam paused. "My wife left the second year I was home. She couldn't live with the version of me that came back." Langston said nothing. He knew too many versions of this story. "I took jobs, construction, mostly. Heavy lifting, good men on those crews. But the body wears down, knee gave out, then the shoulder, couldn't keep up." He looked up. Miss one rent check and the clock starts ticking. A long silence followed. Sam wasn't telling a sob story. He was stating facts like reading coordinates on a map. No drama, no bitterness, just the unrelenting progression of being left behind. "I slept in my truck for a while," he said. "Then the truck got towed. After that, sidewalks, shelters, back alleys." Langston nodded slowly. "Any contact with the VA since then?" Sam gave a short laugh. "I stopped trying. Got tired of waiting on phone lines that never picked up. Besides, I figured someone else needed it more." Langston let that hang. "You ever tell anyone who you were?" he asked. Sam shook his head. "Didn't matter. People don't see medals when you're sleeping under cardboard. They just see someone to step around." He paused. "I had a uniform once. Dress blues, bronze star, 2 purple hearts, silver star from Fallujah." He looked down at his hands. "Now I get told to move along by cops half my age." Langston didn't respond. He didn't need to. Some truths are too clear for commentary. "What changed?" Sam asked finally. "Why are you here?" Langston leaned back. "Judge Holloway recognized your name. She asked me to look into your file." Sam's brows furrowed. "Judge Holloway?" Langston nodded. "She served on the bench for 20 years, but before that she had a brother, Lieutenant Ben Holloway. Marine, Fallujah, April 2004. Something shifted in Sam's face. "Ben Holloway. Yeah, young officer, good man, took around to the side trying to pull a medic out. I dragged him back." "You saved his life." Sam was quiet for a moment. "I tried." Langston looked him in the eye. "He made it. Lived 2 more weeks. Wrote letters home. In those letters, he wrote about you." Sam blinked. He looked down. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. "I didn't know." "She's kept those letters, all these years." Langston opened his briefcase and slid a photocopy across the table. "This is one of them." Sam hesitated, then took it. The paper trembled slightly in his hands. "Staff Sergeant Whitaker pulled me out when I told him not to. He said, 'No Marine gets left behind.' I owe him more than I can say." Sam closed his eyes. I thought maybe I made it worse, like I saved him just to let him die later." Langston placed a hand over the letter. "You gave him time. You gave his family a goodbye. That's more than most get." The door opened softly. A bailiff stepped in. "Judge Holloway is ready." Langston stood. Sam rose more slowly. His knees groaned, but his back remained straight. Not because he was proud, but because something in him refused to bow. As they walked back to the courtroom, Sam whispered, "You really think they'll listen?" Langston didn't promise, but he said, "They'll see you." And for Sam Whitaker, that was already more than most days. Judge Margaret Holloway sat alone in her chambers, her robe folded neatly across the back of her chair. The case file remained open before her, but her focus had shifted entirely. She stared at the name again. Samuel Whitaker. She whispered it under her breath, as if hearing it aloud might somehow change the weight it carried. Her hands moved slowly, almost automatically, pulling open a side drawer in her desk. Inside lay a small weathered box, unmarked, except for a ribbon tied decades ago and never untied since. She opened it with the care of someone unearthing something sacred. Inside, a photograph, its corners soft and faded. A younger version of herself, smiling beside her brother, Lieutenant Ben Holloway, in his Marine dress uniform. His arm was draped around her shoulders, pride radiating from his posture. They had taken that photo the day he shipped out. Beside it sat a letter, creased and yellowed. The last one Ben ever wrote. She unfolded it slowly, her fingers trembling. His voice lived in every line. "We got hit hard outside Fallujah yesterday. Lost 2, but we made it out, because of one man. A staff sergeant named Whitaker. He dragged me back from the line under fire, took 2 rounds in the vest, never flinched, told me no Marine gets left behind. I think he saved more than my life yesterday. He gave me time to write this, time to matter." Margaret closed her eyes. For years, she had held on to that letter like oxygen. And for years, she had searched. The military told her the man in question had redeployed, then discharged due to combat trauma. No forwarding address, no closure. Just a name. Whitaker. Now 20 years later, that man sat in her courtroom, wearing the same name, and the same weight in his eyes. She wiped her eyes quickly, regaining control. Her late husband, a lawyer before his passing, had often warned her, emotion clouds discretion, especially on the bench. But today it wasn't emotion, it was clarity. A knock broke the silence. David Langston stepped inside, his face somber. "Margaret," he said softly. Only a few people still called her that. She looked up. "It's him, David. It's really him." Langston gave a slow nod. "I've reviewed his file, deployment records, unit rosters. It matches everything Ben wrote." She motioned to the photograph and letter on the desk. He stepped closer, recognizing the young Marine in the photo. "That was the last day we saw him," Margaret said. "Ben believed in him, said he was the kind of Marine others would follow through hell." David's expression shifted as the realization deepened. "The homeless vet you've been trying to find all these years," Margaret nodded. "He's been right here, slipping through the cracks like thousands of others." Langston exhaled slowly. "He doesn't know who you are, does he?" "No," she said quietly. "I was Margaret Holloway when Ben was alive. After law school, I married Thomas, took his last name, became Judge Holloway. To Sam, I'm just another black robe behind a bench." She looked up, a spark behind her eyes. "But not today." David hesitated. "You could recuse yourself, let another judge take over." She shook her head. "No, I've let this man disappear once, I won't do it again." David paused. "You understand the risk. Ethics. Public scrutiny." "There's another kind of ethics too," she said. "The kind that remembers who carried your brother out of fire so you could hug him one last time." She stood, her resolve returning to her spine. "This isn't charity. It's recognition, and it's long overdue." Langston nodded. "I'll be right beside you." As they exited her chambers, Margaret Holloway took a deep breath. The judge's mask slid back into place, but this time, it wasn't to hide. It was to protect what mattered. Inside the courtroom, people turned as she entered. Sam stood quietly beside Langston. He didn't seem to notice her eyes lingering on him a moment longer than usual. But she noticed everything. The slow way he rose, the old pain in his knees, the way his hands still clenched with a soldier's discipline. Even in second-hand clothes and handcuffs, he carried himself like someone who had once held a line no one else could. Margaret looked at him, really looked, for the first time. He had once saved her family. Now it was time for someone to save his. Judge Margaret Holloway adjusted her glasses with hands just barely trembling. She sat straighter than usual. Her voice, however, remained calm, formal, and exact. "Mr. Langston," she said, "has your client made a decision?" Langston rose smoothly. "Yes, Your Honor. We request dismissal of all charges. Mr. Whitaker was not trespassing. He was trying to survive sub-zero conditions. We also have witness testimony that employees of Jefferson Street Cafe allowed him to remain on the premises." The prosecutor opened his mouth to object, but Judge Holloway raised one hand. "Noted," she said, cutting him off. Then she turned. "Mr. Whitaker," she said, her voice steady, "I have a few questions for you directly." Sam nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am?" "Your military file lists Fallujah, April 2004. 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines. Is that correct?" He blinked. "Yes, ma'am." She paused. "And on April 17th of that year, were you assigned to an operation on the western edge of the city?" Sam's jaw tightened, his eyes focused, not on her, but on something only he could see. A memory playing silently across 20 years of silence. Yes, ma'am. We were escorting a convoy. Took fire near a checkpoint. Everything fell apart fast. During that engagement, she continued, did you rescue a wounded officer under enemy fire? A lieutenant named Benjamin Holloway? The air left the courtroom. Silence fell, thick and full of weight. Sam's brows furrowed. Holloway, he said softly, as if the name itself had been waiting in his mouth all this time. Yeah, young officer. Took a hit trying to pull a corpsman to safety. I grabbed him, pulled him behind a blown-out truck. He kept yelling at me to go help the others, told me to leave him. Sam paused. His eyes misted, but he didn't blink them away. I told him no Marine gets left behind, not on my watch. In the gallery, an older man in a Marine League jacket suddenly stood. His voice carried from the back. That's him, he said, loud and clear. That's Staff Sergeant Whitaker. I was there. He saved 6 of us that day. The courtroom stirred. Murmurs rippled. Judge Holloway tapped her gavel, but the usual steel in her voice wasn't there. Order, she said, softly, almost reflexively. The older Marine didn't sit. Your Honor, he said, voice steady, I don't mean to interrupt protocol, but that man saved lives. My life. We wouldn't be here without him. The prosecutor tried again. Your Honor, with all due respect, Mr. Whitaker's service, while commendable, is not relevant to the charges at hand. Judge Holloway turned to him sharply. The court disagrees. It is entirely relevant. She took off her glasses slowly, folded them, and placed them down. Then she stood. This court will recess for 10 minutes, she announced. Bailiff, please ensure Mr. Whitaker remains here. As she turned to leave the bench, something rare happened. She paused. Her eyes met Sam's, not as a judge, not as an authority, but as someone who knew. Mr. Whitaker, she said, her voice lower now, when I return, there are matters far beyond this case that we need to discuss. He looked up, truly looked at her. And something shifted in his eyes. Recognition hadn't come yet, but the walls inside him, long hardened, began to stir. Inside her chambers once more, Margaret collapsed into her chair. Her breath was short. She pressed a hand against her lips, containing 20 years of grief, silence, and wonder. Then she reached for the phone. Colonel Raymond Cole, she said when the line picked up. It's Margaret Holloway. A beat. Yes, I know it's been a while. I need a favor. Urgently. 10 minutes later, when she returned to the courtroom, she was not alone. 3 Marines walked in behind her. A full colonel in full dress, a master sergeant, and a young corporal carrying a polished wooden case. The gallery gasped. Even the prosecutor looked stunned. Sam stood on instinct. His joints protested, but his posture was straight. It was muscle memory. Years of it. Judge Holloway didn't return to her seat. Instead, she addressed the courtroom directly. Before we proceed, she said, I must disclose a personal connection. She turned to Sam. The Lieutenant Benjamin Holloway you mentioned, that was my brother. Gasps echoed. Sam blinked. His jaw moved slightly, but no words came. 20 years ago, she continued, my brother wrote about a staff sergeant who ran through enemy fire to save him. That man disappeared soon after. We never heard from him again. She looked down at the wooden case now placed on the bench. That man was you. The older Marine from earlier stepped forward again. It's true, he said firmly. I saw it with my own eyes. Whitaker took 2 rounds getting our men out. He didn't hesitate. Colonel Cole stepped forward. Staff Sergeant Samuel Whitaker, he said, his voice official and unwavering. You've been hard to find. He motioned to the corporal who opened the case. Inside, a medal rested on navy blue velvet. By order of the Secretary of the Navy, the colonel said, in recognition of extraordinary bravery on April 17, 2004, the Navy Cross is hereby awarded to Staff Sergeant Samuel Whitaker, United States Marine Corps. The courtroom stilled. For one long moment, no one moved. Then, softly from the back, came a single voice. Attention on deck. The older Marine stood at full salute. Then another, and another. Soon the entire room was on its feet. Veterans, officers, even the prosecutor. One by one, they rose and saluted. Not a word was spoken. But for the first time in years, Sam Whitaker stood surrounded by something he hadn't felt in decades. Honor. Not in words, not in medals, but in silence. The kind that says, we see you now. Sam Whitaker remained standing, his back stiff from years of wear, but now lifted by something deeper, something he couldn't name. The silence was total. A room full of strangers, saluting a man who had spent years being ignored on the street. And still, he seemed unsure what to do with it. Colonel Raymond Coles stepped forward and addressed him directly. "Sergeant Whitaker, this recognition is long overdue. Portions of your mission were classified for years, but new reviews under the Veterans Reconsideration Initiative confirmed the full scope of your actions that day." He motioned again to the medal in the wooden case. "Your Silver Star has now been formally upgraded to the Navy Cross, the second highest award for valor in combat. Your efforts didn't just save Lieutenant Holloway, they disrupted an ambush that could have wiped out the entire convoy." Sam's jaw clenched slightly. His voice, when it came, was low. "There must be some mistake. I didn't do anything special. I just did what needed doing." "No mistake, Sergeant," the colonel replied, "and that humility is exactly why this matters." From the gallery, the older Marine spoke again. "You don't remember me, Staff Sergeant, but I remember you. You carried us when everything fell apart. I've told my kids your name every Memorial Day." Sam lowered his head slightly. His eyes burned. Judge Holloway stepped down from the bench. She no longer wore the mask of neutrality. She stood before Sam not as a judge, but as someone whose life had been forever shaped by what he did that day. "My brother talked about you in every letter home," she said. "You were more than a rescuer. You were the example he wanted to live up to." Sam swallowed hard. "I always wondered if I did the right thing saving him. He died 2 weeks later. Sometimes I thought I just delayed it." "No," she said firmly. "You gave us time we never would have had, time to say goodbye. That's not a delay, that's a gift." A court officer approached holding a tablet. "Sir," he said gently, "we've been trying to locate you. Your VA records have been corrected. Your disability status is now officially listed as 100% service-connected, retroactive to your discharge." Sam blinked. "What does that even mean?" "It means full medical care, housing assistance, back pay, educational benefits, everything you are owed since the day they let you go." Langston, standing beside him, stepped forward. "And my firm will make sure every piece of that gets processed. No more waiting, no more red tape." A few rows back, Tommy Rise, the cafe cook, rose quietly. He looked out of place in the polished courtroom, his apron strings still showing beneath a jacket he'd rushed to put on. "My dad used to tell me about you," he said, voice shaking. "He served with you. Said if I ever met a man named Sam Whitaker, I owed him everything." Tommy looked down for a moment, then met Sam's eyes. "I didn't know, until today, that it was you." He stepped forward, reached out and placed something into Sam's hand, a weathered photo. In it, a group of young Marines posed with arms around each other. One of them was Tommy's father. Sam stared at the image. For a long time, he said nothing. Then, he was a good Marine, smiled even in sandstorms. A few people laughed softly. It broke the tension. Even the prosecutor, visibly shaken, stood and walked over. "Sir," he said quietly, "I had no idea. Please accept my apology for how this case was handled. We saw a record, not a person." Sam nodded, not out of forgiveness but understanding. Judge Holloway stepped closer, her voice softer now. "My brother told us what you said to him. That day in Fallujah. No Marine gets left behind, not on my watch." She paused. "Today, Sergeant Whitaker, we keep that promise to you." She lifted her gavel one final time. "In light of these extraordinary developments, all charges against Staff Sergeant Samuel Whitaker are hereby dismissed." She brought it down with a firm strike. "This courtroom is adjourned." But no one moved. Because this wasn't just a legal ending. It was something else. Sam stood still as people slowly began to approach, not to stare, but to shake his hand, to thank him, to acknowledge what he'd carried all these years in silence. A woman placed a hand on his shoulder. "My son came home because of men like you." A young Marine in uniform saluted him, eyes glistening. "I joined because of men like you." And for the first time in decades, Sam didn't feel like a ghost. He felt present, real, seen. Not for what he'd lost, but for what he'd given. 2 weeks later, Samuel Whitaker stood in front of a mirror he hadn't looked into in years. The apartment was modest, 2 rooms, clean walls, soft light. Part of a housing program built for veterans like him. No plaques, no flags, just peace. On the wall above a small desk hung a frame. Inside it, the Navy Cross, his long-lost Purple Hearts, and service medals he hadn't seen since his storage locker was sold years ago. Langston's firm had recovered them. Said it was the least they could do. He touched the glass gently, not with pride, not with regret, just presence. There was a knock at the door. He opened it to find Margaret Holloway, no longer in robes, just herself. She held a small wooden box in her hands. "May I come in, Sergeant Whitaker?" "Just Sam," he said, smiling faintly. "Then just Margaret," she replied, stepping inside. They sat across from each other, the quiet between them not uncomfortable but familiar. Two people who had carried the weight of someone long gone and finally found where to lay it down. "I brought something," she said. Inside the box was a bundle of letters, old, fragile, carefully tied. "They're from Ben. He wrote home every week. I thought you might want to read the ones that mention you." He took one slowly. His hands, though rough and weathered, held it like something sacred. In neat handwriting, the words came alive. "Staff Sergeant Whitaker did something yesterday I still can't believe. He ran into open fire like it was nothing. Pulled me out, refused to leave me behind, even when I ordered him to. He said, 'Not on my watch.'" Sam swallowed. "He mentioned you often," Margaret said. "Said you were the kind of Marine he hoped to become." He looked down. He was a good officer. Still green, but he cared. That's rare. Margaret looked around the apartment. Her eyes settled on the medals. "After he died," she said quietly, "I went to law school. I thought maybe the system could be different if someone on the inside remembered what men like him lived through. I helped create the Veterans Court program, the housing initiative. It started because of the things he wrote." Sam shifted. "I'm not a hero," he said. "I just did what needed doing." "That's what heroes always say," Margaret replied, her voice barely above a whisper. There was a long silence. Then she said, "There's something else." She pulled out a final letter. This one, dated the morning her brother was killed. "He volunteered for that mission," she said. "He told us in the letter it was because of you, because he wanted to live up to the example you set." Sam closed his eyes. For 20 years he'd carried the doubt like a wound that never closed. "I used to think," he said quietly, "that saving him only made the loss harder." "No," she said. "You gave us something precious. You gave us 2 more weeks. A funeral with a body. A goodbye, a chance." Outside, snow had started to fall, soft, slow, like a kind of grace. Sam watched it gather on the windowsill. "For a long time," he said, "sleeping on sidewalks, I kept thinking no one remembered, like it didn't matter anymore." Margaret touched his shoulder gently. "But it did," she said. "To Ben, to the Marines you carried, and to me." She stood to leave. At the door she turned. "Ben used to say, the measure of a Marine isn't what he does when people are watching. It's what he does when no one sees. You lived that. Even when the world forgot." Sam nodded slowly. His voice was quiet but steady. "Someone remembered my name," he said. "After all this time, someone remembered." And with that, something long broken began to heal. Not just in him, but in every person who'd ever been left behind by the system they served. There are heroes who save lives, and then spend a lifetime waiting for someone to save theirs. But sometimes, dignity doesn't need headlines. It just needs to be seen. If you've ever seen someone misjudged by what they've lost, comment 1. If you still believe quiet honor can outlast noise and power, comment 2. And if stories like this matter to you, subscribe. We tell them so no one has to disappear in silence again.